you have to wait months. You can't just walk in and buy everything. This is trying too hard. I recently went overseas and I found a cheesecake brand. What caught my eyes was the color, the bag, and the branding. And it reminds me of some luxury brand. At first, my thought sounds ridiculous, but the more I looked at it, the more it made sense. Hi, I'm Varali. I have spent the last 17 years building brands for startups, some from making zero to generating millions. So I tend to see patterns in how people decide what feels valuable and what doesn't. So in this video, I want to break it down for you. This isn't about cheesecake, and it's not really about Hermes either. Hermes. It's about how your brand decides what feels premium, what feels cheap, and what you are willing to pay for. So there's a brand called Kumo Kumo Cheesecake. If you have seen it, you probably remember the soft, jiggly cheesecake, the cues, and the bright orange packaging. And then there's Hermes. Completely different category. Luxury fashion, heritage brand, extremely expensive. But somehow they share similar feeling. And that's what I want to break down. There's something in psychology called anchoring bias, and it's basically means the first thing you see becomes your reference point. Everything else is judged relative to that. If I show you something that looks expensive first, your brain goes, okay, this is the level. And then everything gets compared to that level, even if it's not actually the same. Now, here where it gets interesting. Hermes has a very strong visual identity, especially one thing, they're orange. And it's not just any orange. It's very specific, very consistent. And over time, that color becomes associated with luxury, gifts, status, intention. So when you see it, you don't think, you just feel this is premium. Now, look at Kumo Kumo. They also use orange, not exactly the same, but just close enough. And your brand does something subtle. It doesn't say, this is Hermes. It says, this feels familiar and elevated. And you don't really understand what it is, but you can feel it. And this is important. Kumo Kumo is not copying Hermes directly. And they're not trying to be Hermes. What they're doing is borrowing a visual shortcut your brain already understands. But here's the part where most people miss. Color alone doesn't work. If Kumo Kumo just used orange, but everything else felt cheap, it will break instantly. What they actually do is stacking signals. Clean packaging. The bag feels very premium. It is thicker than normal shopping bags. Minimal design, controlled presentation, queues outside the store, limited batches. So now your brain sees, okay, this feels intentional. Maybe it's worth waiting for. Maybe this is special. Now compare that to Hermes. Hermes doesn't create hype, they create distance. You can't just walk in and buy everything. Sometimes you have to wait months, even years. That's what they say. So the signal becomes, not everyone can have this. They both create scarcity. Let's break it down a little further. Hermes say, not everyone gets this. Kumo Kumo says, better get it before it's gone. Same emotion, different mechanism. And this is why people compare them. Not because they are equal, but because they trigger similar feelings. Anticipation, curiosity, perceived value. And this is where it gets interesting for me. Because once you see this, you realize people are not reacting to products. They react to signals. And brands are basically systems that control those signals. Not just what you see, but how you interpret what you see. That's why people say a brand is defined as a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or organization. So when you look at something and you think, this feels expensive, or this feels cheap, most of the time, it's not the product itself. It's the combination of cues around it. Color is one cue, but it's never the only one. You also have spacing, language, consistency, behavior, context, all working together. So Kumo Kumo didn't just choose this color randomly. whether consciously or not, they show something that already has meaning in your brain. And then they supported it with the experience. But this is also where people get it wrong. They think, just copy luxury signals. And then they use the same colors, same fonts, same minimal look, but the experience doesn't match. And when that happens, your brain immediately feels this is trying too hard, and you have seen it. Because your brain actually very good at detecting inconsistency. You don't need to understand branding. You just feel something is off. So the real lesson here is not just use the same color. It is understand what your audience already associates with value, and then design your experience to match that expectation. Now when I see something is working, I don't ask, what are they selling? I ask, what are they making people feel? I'm curious though, have you ever bought something not because you needed it, but because you just felt right? Comment below.